Could you imagine waking up one day and a million soldiers are standing at your doorstep? Soldiers who are not above breaking the ancient Geneva Convention with superior weapons and armor and siege weaponry led by freaking Rajendra Chola. Anuradhapura, its capital by the same name, had been around for 1400 years by that point, basically since the beginning of Sinhala history, and for the first time it was abandoned. So destructive was the sack of the Cholas that Anuradhapura would never be lived in again. Is it time? Is it time to talk about RajaRaja Chola? Yes, it is. Now, the only king I need to hear about is Chhatrapati Shivaji, and I am set. Oh boy, that's going to take a while. Anyway, the last time we left the Chola Empire, RajaRaja Chola, or colloquially Arulmozhi Varman, had left the empire in the hands of his uncle to avoid a civil war. And for 14 years, Uttama Chola reigned over a peaceful time. Uttama Chola spent most of his reign reorganizing the military and building temples. It does seem that the Pandyas did rebel one more time, but we do not have much details of this event. Point is, RajaRaja Chola found his empire exactly how his father had left it, with a little more integration and a few more temples. The first thing that RajaRaja Chola did was to reorganize his military further. There is very little evidence of him conquering anything in the first few years of his reign, meaning that he was continuing the effort taken up by his uncle to reorganize the military. We don't know the exact details of this transformation, but there's a marked difference between the army and the navy that served under his father, Parantakar II, and the army and the navy that served under him. It had modernized in a way. There was an upgrade to their weapons, to siege tactics, and to their armor, as well as their navy becoming one of the best in the region. The first conquest he did was to conquer northern Kerala. At that time, Kerala was under the Chera kings, who were one of the three major kingdoms from the Sangam age alongside the Pandyas and the Cholas. For most of the time that they had re-emerged from the Kalabra dynasty, they had been feudal lords to the Pandyas, but they had been made independent after the conquest of the Pandya country by the Cholas. These Chera kings had sent their daughters to marry Chola kings as a way to ally with them. But during the time of RajaRaja Chola, they were harboring the forces of the Pandyan kings. So RajaRaja Chola attacked them and won against a combined force of the Cheras and the Pandyas in the Battle of Kadur Salai in 988 AD. The battle was the first one where he used the combined might of his army and his navy to completely dominate the battlefield. Over the course of the next decade, he would go on a campaign to subjugate all of Kerala and the southern half of the Pandya country in between Madurai and Kanyakumari, which was the core of the Pandya country. The Pandyas kept rebelling and breaking off from the empire only to be defeated and subjugated. When do these Pandya forces stop being a factor? 16th century. What? Don't worry about it. At the end of it all, there was only Malay Nadu left, which is the southern half of Kerala and Chera country. This is where the Cholas had sent an envoy to barter peace, only to have that envoy insulted. That was the worst mistake of the Chera's life. As RajaRaja Chola launched a brutal campaign into this region, led by his son Rajendra Chola, it is believed that he hunted down and beheaded the 18 princes of this dynasty, completely ending the main line of the Cheras. The port town of Udagai was also completely destroyed. Oh, so they did that with the Cheras but not the Pandyas for some reason. In one of the reconquests of the Pandya countries in the south, one of the Pandya princes turned court and swore his allegiance to the Chola kings, continuing his dynasty as a fiduciary under the Cholas. After these conquests, and by 1005 AD, RajaRaja Chola had started calling himself Mummudi Chola, or the three-crowned king. While his father had conquered the northern edges of Sri Lanka, it was under RajaRaja Chola that they would end up conquering the interior areas of the kingdom of Anuradhapura. As the Chola Empire was busy completing his conquest of South India, the kingdom of Anuradhapura would grow weaker from rebellions, resulting in them not being able to pay the Tamil mercenaries that made up the majority of their forces, which made them defect to the Cholas. RajaRaja Chola did not miss the opportunity to conquer Anuradhapura. Its capital, by the same name, had been around for 1400 years by that point, basically since the beginning of Sinhala history, and for the first time it was abandoned. So destructive was the sack of the Cholas that Anuradhapura would never be lived in again. A copper plate from this time commemorates the sack of Sri Lanka by likening it to Ram's attack on Lanka by saying Ram built with the aid of his monkeys a causeway across the sea, and then with great difficulties defeated the king of Lanka using sharp-edged arrows. But Rama was excelled by this king, whose powerful army crossed the ocean by ships and burnt the king of Lanka. Yikes. That's not where his exploits end. You see, at around 973 AD, the Rashtrakuta Empire had been overthrown by the Western Chalukyas, and in 998 AD they were attacked by the Cholas. In an inscription of Irvabadanga Satyashraya, who was a vassal to the Western Chalukyas, it is written that the prince of the Chola Empire, Rajendra Chola, had showed up with 995,000 soldiers who did not adhere to the code of war as prescribed by Dharma Shastra. Could you imagine waking up one day and 1,000,000 soldiers are standing at your doorstep? Soldiers who are not above breaking the ancient Geneva Convention, with superior weapons and armor and siege weaponry led by freaking Rajendra Chola. Holy! For context, if we were to rank this army that showed up in Western Chalukya Empire on the table of the modern active militaries, it would rank on number 6 after China, India, the US, North Korea and Russia. And this was just one of their several concurrent campaigns. According to the Hotur inscription dated to around 1007 to 1008 AD, the Chola king with forces numbering 900,000 had plundered the whole country and slaughtered the women, the children and the Brahmin, and taking the girls as their wives, destroying their caste. RajaRaja's inscription indicate that his elephants wreaked havoc on the banks of the river Tungabhadra. RajaRaja failed to capture the Chalukya capital of Manyakheta. Though overwhelmed by the overwhelming advance of the Cholan army, the king of the Chalukyas quickly recovered and fought back, which made the Cholas retreat. RajaRaja had wanted the whole empire, but though he failed, he had managed to conquer the southern half of the empire up till the river Tungabhadra in modern day Karnataka. What the hell did the Chalukya Empire do to have the literal demon horde show up at their doorstep? I don't know. Nobody knows. Meanwhile, this wasn't the only conflict that the Chola Empire was involved in. You see, in the Eastern Chalukya Empire, there was a succession crisis going on, where the Chalukyas had bagged a prince to the throne, while the rightful prince, Shaktivarman I, had been ousted by them. So, RajaRaja Chola decided to help Shaktivarman I retake his throne. This, by the way, was a separate contingent of the army from the one attacking the Western Chalukyas and subjugating the Cheras and the Pandyas. Did the Chola Empire have more military personnel than the modern state of India? You know what? I don't know, man. Maybe. Anyway, Shaktivarman I recognized that he couldn't have reached the throne without the help of the Cholas. So he accepted their suzerainty, and to make sure that he remained subjugated, RajaRaja Chola made his daughter marry his son, thus starting the Chalukya Chola dynasty. Can we acknowledge the whirlwind that was Rajendra Chola? I mean, He led an army of 1,000,000 men into Chalukya territory, wreaked havoc, conquered half the empire, briefly paused his expedition to attend his sister's wedding, and then he returned to continue his expedition, to then turn around and go to southern Chera country and hunt down their prince and destroy its capital, all within the decade. And oh boy, that's not even close to all he does, because then he conquered Kalinga. Oh come on, how much more should my boy Kalinga suffer? We don't know much about this conquest aside from that it happened, and Rajendra defeated the Andhra king Bhim to do it. He shares the same name with the king that they ousted from eastern Chalukya to install Shakti Varman. They might or might not be the same person. The last conquest that the RajaRaja Chola ever conducted was a naval expedition to the Maldives. It was imperative to securing trade lines across the Arabian Sea. In fact, most of their conquests were an attempt to become the sole leader in the seafaring trade in the Indian Ocean. This suggests that there was an influence of the trade guilds over the Chola throne, an influence that pushed them to monopolize the trade networks across the ocean. RajaRaja Chola spent the last 6 years of his life in relative peace, no longer participating in any new conquests. In the last 2 years of his life, his son Rajendra Chola had been elected as the co-ruler of the empire. He had complete rule over the newly conquered northern territories. Over the course of his rule, RajaRaja centralized his power. Before him, each area in the Chola Empire had its own lord and prince. He installed direct rule of the emperor across the empire. And in the last few years of his reign, he revolutionized the taxing system, making it significantly more efficient, helping him raise more revenue without making his populace feel that they were being looted. He made sure that every one of his accomplishments was recorded in a standardized way in his inscriptions, whether it be military or otherwise. We don't have any portraits of him that we know of. This is believed to be him with his guru, but that's just speculation. We don't even know too much about his personality. What we do know is that he was incredibly influenced by his elder sister Kundavai. Despite her being married, she had decided to stay in Tanjavur. It is even believed that she held more influence over the populace of the Chola Empire than many of RajaRaja's wives, and maybe even might have run the court while he was away in conquest. She even helped raise his son Rajendra Chola, and she taught him statecraft and history, meaning that she must have been very well versed in it herself. RajaRaja had many wives, but not many of his children are known. We of course know of Rajendra Chola, and we also know of 2 of his daughters, one of whom married the prince of Eastern Chalukyas, while the other gave up on her right to marriage and became a Buddhist monk. RajaRaja Chola would die in 1014 AD to be succeeded by his son Rajendra Chola, the man who would control the whole ocean. We will talk about him in the next video. See you next time.